Where did all the ammo go? And why is it so expensive? Who's hiding it? Today, I'm gonna let you in on a little secret about ammunition scarcity and who's to blame for it. Then we'll get in some shooting practice and end it with some ways to plan your next range day in the tip of the week. I'm Paige Rue, and this is Reloaded. Think back to your childhood and imagine Santa Claus the week of Christmas. Busting out toys, production lines are moving, everything is looking good. Then Santa looks down at his list and realizes, oh snap, America has millions of new children that just popped up, and now he needs to make a toy for every single one of them like yesterday. That is how ammunition manufacturers felt when there were 8.4 million new gun owners in 2020. If you haven't realized, ammunition is just a little expensive right now. Before 2020, you were able to buy 50 rounds of ammunition for $12 to $15. But now we're seeing those same boxes of 9mm go for $40 to even $60. Whew. Most of the blame for this price increase has been put on manufacturers or dealers, the people who are selling in-store or online. I've also heard only the big box stores jack up their prices. They're big corporate America. False. Now, were there businesses taking advantage of gun owners and price gouging? Yes, probably. But most dealers across the country were experiencing empty shelves and unheard of prices. So who's to blame for this? Nobody. And here's why. This is a cartridge. And if you learn only one thing from me today, let it be that this is called a cartridge. The bullet is only one piece of it. Other names for this guy is ammo, a round, ammunition if you're talking about more than one. But cartridge is the technical term. Bullet? No, we're better than that. Stop calling it that now. Firearms are chambered in calibers, meaning they call for specific cartridges. And there's different ammo for rifles, pistols, and shotguns. So let's take a look at some. .22 long rifle is one of the smallest calibers. It's super fun to shoot because it hardly has any recoil. Pre-2020, you could buy a box of 50 for as low as $4. .380 is the next step in size and also popular because it has more stopping power for self-defense, but doesn't have as much recoil. Pre-2020, we're looking at $19 for a box of 50. 9mm is the caliber I'm going to be referring to most today because it's more popular on the market, especially for personal and home protection. You'll find tons of firearms chambered in 9mm, so your options are a lot higher, and my personal favorite, about $15 for 50 before 2020. There are larger calibers like 40 and 45, which pack more of a punch, but are a little bit more expensive, about $20 to $25 for a box. All of these are pistol calibers, and then these are rifle calibers. I want to explain all of this before getting into the nitty-gritty stuff because regardless of what caliber you have, they are all protected by our constitutional right to bear arms. Now that we're clear on that, let's talk about why ammunition got so expensive in 2020. Do you know what a cartridge is made out of? There's 4 components: a bullet, casing, gunpowder, and primer. The bullet, also known as projectile, is the rounded tip that goes down your barrel and hits your target. There are different types of projectiles, but this one is most commonly used for target practice. The casing holds all of it together and is the piece that flies out every time that you shoot. And then within the casing, there's gunpowder, which is what gets ignited and sends the bullet down the barrel. The primer is at the back of the casing, so when you pull the trigger, a firing pin hits the primer, causing all the stuff to happen. All of these are made from raw materials in different factories. Once made, they are sent off to ammunition manufacturers where they're put together and packaged all pretty and finally sent to a third-party distributor or directly to retailers for purchase. In normal times, this was fine. There was a system and demand that stayed pretty consistent. We'd only really see the demand jump when there's a type of political event or media panic that happened in America. And as a result, people would then stock up and the factories would take about 3 months to catch up, but pricing would essentially stay the same. But now, throw in a global pandemic, a presidential election, closed borders overseas, defunding the police, civil unrest, and millions of new gun owners, and see what you get. Factories get called from manufacturers to say, dude, we need a bajillion more primers ASAP. Factories aren't going to buy another facility for this one rare occurrence. Instead, they're going to hire more workers, pay overtime wages, buy more machines, and stay open 24 hours to have a chance to meet demand. And now the cost of that one little primer just went way up. That happened with all 4 components. And once that one box of 9mm was packaged and ready to ship, the cost was already higher than what consumers were once used to paying. And we're not even halfway through the process yet. Don't forget the distributors and the retailers. By the time that one box reaches you, the consumer, it's a whopping $50. I feel like people think all of the retailers hopped on a conference call and said, hey, we love America and freedom, and it looks like millions more people are also going to exercise their Second Amendment rights, so let's price gouge them on ammo just to be bullies. No. Other questions I've received are, why is ammo cheaper at some stores than others? Or, how do you have ammo but my local gun store doesn't? Now, depending on the state and relationship between distributors and retailers, everyone was in a different situation. Here's an example. Let's go with Store A, Store B, and Store C. So Store A orders ammunition when they can financially. So they're going to spend a lot more time finding less expensive ammo from a place that doesn't require a massive quantity order. However, due to last year's circumstances, cheap ammo simply wasn't an option. So Store A would have to make a choice of having empty shelves or paying a pretty penny to stock them, if they can even find it. Store B is the opposite of Store A. They load up whenever it becomes available. This means it's expensive, but you know their shelves are always stocked. Now, Store C is a larger company such as the Bass Pros, the Sportsmans, or the Shields. They normally have pricing contracts for X amount of months. They will be locked in at that price. This is why their prices stayed consistent, but they couldn't get the quantity needed to meet demand. Also, if manufacturers don't renew that contract, Store C's prices go up. Speaking from personal experience, my family's range is Store B. We're a gun shop, a training facility, and a shooting range. We can't be Store C because we're not a big box store and don't require the quantities that they do. But if we were Store A, we wouldn't be able to run classes or rent out guns for the shooting range. In 2020, millions of new gun owners created a 139% increase in ammunition since 2019. Factories couldn't keep up and were running around the clock. Retailers couldn't keep ammo on the shelves, but were also faced with incredibly high prices and record high minimums. This was something America has never seen before. But we are still happy people are exercising their freedoms during a time when our Second Amendment is on the line. Hold on to your ammo, folks. There's more to come on Reloaded. With how expensive ammunition has become, it makes it more difficult to just go on the range and spend it. And speaking of range, I'm gonna show you a few of my favorite training tools that don't require any ammo. Let's go. All right, there are ways for you to practice and become a better shooter without using any ammunition. And a common mistake is assuming that you must shoot a certain amount per day to improve, but you don't. And if you're not practicing with purpose, you're basically throwing literal dollars down the range while you're shooting. So there are other training tools that you can take advantage of in order to become a better shooter. My favorite is dry fire. Dry firing is practicing a specific technique or skill with your firearm completely unloaded. And you can do this at the range or at home as long as your firearm is unloaded and pointing in a safe direction. So to unload your firearm, we're first going to take our finger off the trigger, remove the magazine, and then we're gonna rack the slide 2 to 3 times to confirm that nothing's in the chamber. So now that my firearm's unloaded, I'm gonna point it in a safe direction. I'm at the range at Shooters World, so it's super controlled, but if you're at home, be mindful of what walls and targets you're aiming at. Next, with dry fire, you're gonna put your finger on the trigger once you're on target, and you're going to pull the trigger until you hear a click sound. So now before you can pull the trigger again, you have to manually reset it by pulling back the slide. So, Say you recently purchased a firearm and you're practicing at the range and you notice that your shots are dropping, or you're probably raising your shoulders up like this or tensing up your wrists, closing your eyes, or while you're pulling the trigger, you're thinking, when is it gonna go off? When is it gonna go off? When is it gonna go off? And by the time that you pull the trigger, your muzzle or the front of the gun is pointing downward. That's anticipation, and it's so common, especially when you just get into first shooting. My advice, go home and dry fire. Just set up a small target on your wall, like a Post-it note or an index card. And in order to get the most out of dry firing, you need to practice as if the gun were loaded. And what I mean is, don't just, that's sloppy. Get in a good stance, make sure that your grip is right, point your firearm in a safe direction at your target, make sure that you're leaning into it as if the gun were to recoil. Once you're ready, take a deep breath and take a smooth trigger press. Essentially, what your goal is to make sure that there's no movement in your muzzle when you're firing. So it'll look something like this. This will help you when you go out on the range. Don't feel like you have to dry fire for 30 minutes a day or anything like that, especially starting out. Do 10 good times. And if you practice not anticipating at home, then by the time that you come to the range and you're overwhelmed by the live fire, the recoil, it'll help you get more comfortable with your firearm. What won't help you practice is if you're dry firing sloppy like this. My stance was sloppy, my grip was loose, I wasn't aligning my sights, and I was pulling the trigger really fast. Always make sure you practice with purpose. So if you're like me, I like to have clear feedback when I shoot or dry fire. And when you dry fire, you do have to pay attention to the reflex of your muscles, movement of the muzzle, and where your shoulders are at in order to diagnose what you're doing when you pull the trigger. Now, if you're a new shooter, this is really difficult to do. So another tool that you could use that I really enjoy is called a dry fire bore laser. And this is a little laser that goes into your chamber of your firearm just like this. So you pull back the slide on your firearm, drop this into your chamber, make sure your firearm's pointed in a safe direction, and then release your slide. So as you press the trigger, a little laser will pop up on your target. This gives you immediate feedback, and this is why I love this tool. So if you're shaking or you're anticipating, you're gonna notice a little wiggle on your target. So your goal is take a deep breath, line up your sights, smooth trigger press, and a solid red dot. If anticipation is not a problem for you and you're feeling comfortable with the gun and you want to challenge yourself a little bit more, you can absolutely add stress by either putting yourself on a shot timer or drawing from the holster, or both. So if you draw from the holster, make sure that you know how or have been shown how to draw from the holster. But it's gonna look something like this. If I want to add a little bit more stress, I can practice getting in my good stance and drawing from the holster and dry firing. So you can draw from outside the waistband, which means it's exposed like this, or you can draw from concealment, which means that the gun isn't visible to the naked eye, so it's underneath clothing. So it'll look something like this. Another thing that you can do is time yourself with a shot timer. Now, timing yourself will just be able to add a little bit more stress and see how fast you're going. If you're still not having a blast and you want to have a little bit more fun, try this baby out. So this is called a Strikeman, and it's like Nerf target practice for adults. So it works with your phone app, this target, and the dry fire bore laser that's already in my gun. So what you're gonna do is you're gonna set the target up on a table, or you can suction cup the target to a wall, which is really cool. And then set your phone up with this stand and angle it so that it's around 2 to 4 feet from your target. Once you calibrate it and use the Strikeman app, what you can do is use the dry fire bore laser, and it'll tell you where you're hitting on this target, and it'll also provide a lot more feedback than just using the dry fire bore laser. So remember how I told you to make sure you're not being lazy when you dry fire? So this thing will not let you do that. So now that I have everything set up, you're gonna get into a shooting stance, aim at your target, and then pull the trigger. So once you're done, you can do as many shots as you want, but once you're done, you hit the done button on your phone and it'll tell you where you hit on your target and provide you feedback. It'll also tell you where your shots were, your average score, and how you're improving each day, which is really fun. I don't know about you, but I'm super competitive and you could definitely have some fun competing with friends with this. Okay, we've talked a lot about dry firing and not using any live ammo. But if you're going to the range, I'm gonna walk you through the basics of having a range plan so you don't accidentally blow through all of your ammunition. Coming up in the tip of the week. Welcome to the tip of the week where I give you the ammo to become better shooters and responsible gun owners. Whether you've been shooting your whole life or getting ready to fire your first gun, these tips are for you. This week's tip is 3 steps to get more out of your range time. And what we're gonna do is create a range plan. Yes, a range plan. Similar to going to the gym with a plan of which muscles you're gonna work out that day, go to the range with a plan of what you're going to work on and how much ammo is needed. Remember, more ammunition does not mean improvement. Step 1, how much ammo are you willing to shoot? If you have 100 rounds and come to the range without a plan, you're more likely to throw all 100 rounds at your target, and then you feel like maybe another month or so before you can actually get your hands on more. But if you separate that into 25 round practice sessions and dry fire in between your skills at home, you're gonna get better. The next step is to pick a few things that you'd like to work on. I like to focus on 2 to 3 things during a range session. You can definitely do more or less. I just find myself getting overwhelmed when I try to focus on too many things at once. So regardless of your skill level, some fundamentals that you can work on are basic marksmanship, dry fire, shooting one-handed, right and left, drawing from the holster if the range allows it, and malfunctions. Basic marksmanship would simply be your grip, stance, lining up your sights, and trigger press. You can never be too advanced for basic marksmanship. It's your fundamentals and you always have to practice them. Dry fire at the range. Well, you've heard me talk about dry fire for I don't know how long. So yes, absolutely plan to dry fire at the range. Before you practice a technique, plan to dry fire just a few times before adding in live ammunition. One of my favorite things to do is shooting one-handed, right and left. People never practice this, but you have to. If you had to use your firearm for personal protection, it's possible that you may not be able to get a two-handed grip and full extension in a great stance if you need to use your firearm. Or what if you had surgery on your arm and your arm was in a cast and now you only have one arm to hold your firearm? You have to practice these things. If you carry a gun on your body, it's important to practice drawing the gun from the holster as well. Just make sure that you've been shown how to properly do so and that your range also allows it. Sometimes they don't for liability reasons. And last but not least, practice clearing malfunctions. You can stage these functions or jams with dummy rounds so that you can practice identifying them on the range and then clearing them. These are just a few techniques that you can always practice. Once you have your ammunition and what skills you'd like to work on, the last step is choosing your targets. To warm up, I like to start with this smaller circle or bullseye to focus on my basic marksmanship. I like to start with just a few shots on the first circle, evaluate where my shots are, adjust my grip, my stance, smooth trigger press, slow down, and then continue on to the next circle. This is so that I can see the progression of my warm-up. I love doing this for students, and I also think it's really good to warm up with this target or something similar on the range. I use a silhouette target for just about everything. I like to warm up on the 5-spot circle and do the rest of my practice on a silhouette when I'm practicing with my pistol specifically. This one is fun and also a challenge. I use this target in my classes and my students either love it or they hate it. So what you do is you have a friend or an instructor call out a number, a shape, or a color, and you have to hit the target as fast as you can without missing. How I play it is I call out, say, like a 3, and you have to quickly find one of the 3s and shoot it. If I call out a green square, that's 2 commands equals 2 shots. Green square, you have to shoot 1 round at a green and 1 round at a square, or you can shoot 2 rounds at the green square if you're trying to be tricky. This target can be played as a game, but also helps putting some healthy pressure on you while shooting. The last one is really nice because you can use 1 target for your entire training session. It doesn't require a lot of ammunition, and it has you practice a lot of techniques. You can get a lot of training out of just a little bit of ammunition, and these 4 targets, that is why it's so important to have a range plan. It's time for a 2A break. I'll see you next week to discuss the best ways parents can introduce their children into firearms. Ladies and gents, you don't want to miss it. It's time to get our whole family actively and safely engaging with our rights. Don't forget to like, share, and comment on this video so I can talk 2A with you every week. My name is Paige Rue, and your firearm freedom just got reloaded.